Next up, we have Andrea Graves, who has asked that we start thinking about questions. She likes to do questions. And her subject today is pilot project to create oyster reef habitat in the Peace River Estuary. Please welcome Andrea with the Nature Conservancy.
Andrea's abstract will be in our online version of the program agenda. Not there right now. Sorry, Andrea.
That's okay. Good afternoon. Thank you, John. As he said, I'm Andrea Graves with the Nature Conservancy, and I really want to acknowledge my project team because I'm just one part of this large project going on. And my team is Birch, Jaime Boswell, and Geselbracht. This is a pilot project, so it's a work in progress, but I'm going to tell you where we are so far and how we got there. So I'm going to start with a little bit about the project background, how we chose the site for the project, talk about the design and our restoration methods, and the community outreach, and then the monitoring plan that we're developing. So Charlotte Harbor was identified as a marine priority by the Nature Conservancy for Florida. That was through a marine assessment that really looked at habitats and species and recognized the really great biodiversity in this area. And so we wanted to do something in Charlotte Harbor to help protect the coastal habitats. And so that was followed by a feasibility study that our science group did in 2010, which clearly showed a substantial decline in oyster reef habitat and also a high potential for oyster restoration success. And that was also verified through the more recent plan that the Charlotte Harbor Estuary did. And another project that we've started in this area is sea level rise modeling. And that has resulted in us realizing that the coastal wetland systems in Charlotte Harbor are at risk. And I know we've already talked about the benefits that oyster reefs provide to the ecosystem, but I did want to point out that the main purpose of our project is really habitat restoration. So we're looking at restoring the reefs for the species that depend on these oyster reef habitats as nursery areas and as food source. But of course there's also the benefit of the filtering of the water quality. And we're hoping our project will also have some shoreline protection benefits. So when we started looking at putting in a pilot project in Charlotte Harbor, we didn't really know where to start, and we wanted this to be science-based. So that's when we partnered with the Charlotte Harbor NEP, and we were very fortunate to have all the stakeholders that participated in the working group bringing their expertise to this plan. And so that was really our next step, was after the plan was developed, we used that as our guide. And Jaime went into a lot of great explanation of how the restoration suitability model works. But that's really what we started looking at. And we honed in on Punta Gorda because we already had an existing partnership with the City of Punta Gorda that was related to the sea level rise modeling and looking at coastal resilience and how they could better protect their shorelines from storms. And so we specifically were looking at where the model showed 100%, which is the dark green on this map, 100% suitability for oyster reef restoration near that Punta Gorda area. And we knew we would then have to go out in the field and do some more verification. And one thing specifically we needed to check was if there was a presence of oyster larvae in the system. So kind of around the same time, there was a meeting between the City of Punta Gorda and our coastal resilience team. And one of the topics that was discussed was looking at the shoreline and trying to pinpoint areas where stakeholders in the public would like to keep the natural shoreline instead of looking at hardening as an option, and where they might like to see oyster reef restoration occur. And I have a pointer here, but the circle on the map, the map to the left, is showing where a lot of dots were placed to indicate that that was a good area. And so we started looking at this area called Trabue Harborwalk, which is just down the road from where we are right now. And it's at the mouth of the Peace River. And so we identified this as a site that we would want to check out in more detail. So our team went out and we were joined by the Charlotte Harbor National Estuary Program and FWC to look at this area and determine if indeed it would work for a pilot project. And we were really excited when we saw the site. It's about a half mile of mangrove shoreline. It was a spot that was identified 100% suitability from the Oyster Habitat Restoration Plan. Lots of presence of live oysters at the site, but just the substrate limiting factor that we talked about earlier. And public visibility and access are very good at this site, which is something else that was part of the larger plan, was being able to reach out to the community and raise awareness of oyster habitat restoration. So that was a definite bonus. And then it was adjacent to public land, and we've ended up forming this great partnership with the City of Punta Gorda, and they really embraced this project. So just a couple more images from our site visit. We basically walked the half-mile shoreline. The picture in the upper right is a tire that was at the project site, which is covered with live oysters. And the mangrove shot is just showing how the oysters are also attaching to the mangrove roots. But it does indicate that there are some signs of erosion in this particular area. And then the boardwalk that you see goes out to a fishing pier, and that's really where we are ideally going to put the project, so it will have great accessibility and visibility. And another consideration when we plan the project and the design is, of course, this critical habitat for the small-sea sawfish, and adding that additional step of going through the National Marine Fisheries Service to get the biological opinion. And what Anne didn't want to steal from me is that we just found out literally today in the conference that the biological opinion has been received by the Army Corps, and our permit is moving forward. And then we also, Anne talked about the general permit for low profile oyster habitat restoration. And at the time we were designing and putting the permit together, that was in process, the general permit, but it had not yet been approved. The criteria had been outlined. So we decided to use our project as a test case to apply that criteria. And so we did make our total footprint for the project less than a quarter acre, just under a quarter acre. And we chose materials that were identified for restoration in the permit. And this is our design, and the red box is showing actually just the entire area that we permitted, but the actual footprint are these smaller kind of blobs of multicolors that represent 9 intertidal reefs, and 3 subtidal reefs are the pink kind of rectangles to the out. And so we're looking at testing 3 different methodologies: oyster mats, oyster bags, and loose shells surrounded by a perimeter of oyster bags. And we're going to test these in triplicate, so that will inform the monitoring data that we can hopefully then use for other projects as to how these methods work. And we did use the criteria for the general permit, and we did get our state permit in 60 days. So we've had that one for a while, but it worked really well. So these are the 3 methods. The first is oyster mats, and we're going to create, we think, about 1,500 oyster mats for the 3 individual intertidal reefs. And this is a technology that was developed for the Indian River Lagoon by Dr. Linda Walters at University of Central Florida, and then the Nature Conservancy worked closely on that project for the community outreach. And it's been ongoing for, I believe it's almost 10 years now. Extremely successful as far as recruitment and oyster reef formation, but also a really great tool for engaging volunteers in the community. For this particular method, you need to use actual recycled or raw oyster shell. You can't use the fossilized shell because each shell needs to be drilled to attach to that mat. So to the question earlier about oyster shell availability, shell. I had to actually go to call Cedar Key because they have the closest shucking houses to this area. And I called 4 shucking houses and only one called me back. And they actually happened to have a pile of shell. And once they found out what we were going to do with it, and I talked to them at length about the project, it's a family-owned business, they ended up donating the shell to us, which was wonderful. So, Fantastic Seafood in Cedar Key is really the way we got the shell. And it was quarantined on their site and then on the site of Punta Gorda for well over 6 months. And this just shows once the mats are put into the water, this is Mosquito Lagoon. They're actually, each mat is attached on the corners to a concrete sprinkler weight, and it forms almost a quilt-like appearance of a substrate in the water. So the second restoration method we're going to use is oyster bags, and we're going to create about 2,000 oyster bags. This is a methodology that's been used more commonly for restoration, and we're going to use fossilized shell because it's easier to get a large quantity of fossilized shell in a short time frame. And the fossilized shell has been shown in different projects to work equally as well as the raw shell. And this is also a great project, bagging the oyster shell for involving the community volunteers. And we're going to place these bags in a single layer, side by side within the reef footprint. And the third method is the loose shell. This is also fossilized shell that will have a perimeter of oyster bags around it just for containment. And there's going to be 6 reefs with this methodology because we'll do 3 in the intertidal and then the 3 subtidal reefs. We'll just test this one methodology in the subtidal. And we're hoping to do that because there's not as much data available for the subtidal reefs in the estuary, and we would like to know if that's a viable option for future projects. So the community outreach is a big part of this effort as well. And we're really pleased that we were able to partner with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and the Charlotte Harbor Aquatic Reserves. They have a local office in Punta Gorda off of Birch Road. And they hired Kate Hogg, who's in the photo. She had hoped to be there today, but her cars are outside and there's an oyster mat outside that she brought because she's really the one spearheading the local community outreach. And she's looking for volunteers. She's having volunteers drill the shells, get the mat material ready, starting to make mats, and then soon we'll be making the oyster bags as well. So I think some of you, if you know anybody that has a group looking for a project, there's a lot of volunteer opportunities here. And I also just wanted to mention, and I'm sorry if this doesn't show very well, but we are hosting a Charlotte Harbor Coastal Awareness Day on April 26th. It's going to be just locally in the Lashley Park Marina and Community Center, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And this is going to be a family-friendly event, and it's going to include opportunities to make oyster mats, but it will have as well information about the coastal resilience sea level rise work that's going on in Punta Gorda. And there's going to be a panel discussion, which the NEP will be part of, as well as the City of Punta Gorda and the Conservancy, and exhibitors, and also an interactive demonstration of our Coastal Resilience 2.0 online tool. The monitoring plan that we're developing for this project uses just recently, I think just last month, this became official, this Oyster Habitat Restoration Monitoring and Assessment Handbook. And this was developed by a whole group of partners. Noah was a lead, the Nature Conservancy was involved, and probably some of you in the room that are practitioners have some input into this book. But the idea is really to use these universal methods for monitoring so that oyster restoration projects can be compared across different areas. And some of the things that we're going to be looking for at the monitoring, this isn't a complete list. We're going to measure the reef footprint and how that changes over time, the density of the oysters as they recruit, the oyster size and structure. And we're also interested in monitoring the distance between this mangrove shoreline and our oyster reef that's put in, because our hope is that this reef will actually protect that mangrove shoreline with sea level rise and different storm events over time. And we're also looking at how water birds use the area, and pre-restoration and post-restoration, how does that change with the oyster reef in place. And then we just recently partnered with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission to do sawfish tracking near our project site. And that's going to involve tagging and tracking juvenile tawny sawfish in the area. The FWC is already doing some work across the river, so this was a great partnership to involve them with this as well. And what we're trying to determine is a better understanding of how the juvenile sawfish are using oyster reef habitats in the Peace River. We know that the mangroves are very important for the sawfish, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of data on oyster reefs, and we're hoping ultimately this data will help with the critical habitat issue and more flexibility in putting oyster habitat into the estuary. And really, in closing, the keys to the success of this project, as we see it, is that it's planned using a science-based plan, the National Estuary-wide plan. Critical is the community involvement and support. That's also one of the goals of that larger plan. And this is a small project, but we ultimately hope that the results will help inform and advance new oyster reef restoration projects in the estuary, and even provide information to the Gulf of Mexico for future projects. And last but certainly not least, we couldn't do any of this without our local project partners. And we've just been really lucky to work with such wonderful people. The folks at the aquatic preserves, the City of Punta Gorda, NEP has been a great partner, and the Fish and Wildlife, we just got on board with them. And then Jaime, who really helped us get through the permitting process. That was a big hurdle. And then also our funding partners. So thank you for listening, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
Now you knew that you need to come up with some questions. Here we go.
Hi. Yeah, Mr. But what's the difference between intertidal versus subtidal?
So the intertidal area is where the reef will be exposed at low tide, and the subtidal it will not. So it will always just be below the water surface.
And, oh yeah, thank you. And so I guess I have a question for long term. God willing, this will work and we'll have great oyster restoration. But what about if, what I guess long-term goals to prevent the public from consuming them, even though it's in a non-classified zone for us, but coming from like a consumption point of view, let's say we get the oysters back on. Have you guys thought about what you can do to prevent? I noticed the sign out there during the restoration process. Well, will it still be out there? Will law enforcement be involved just so we can at least maintain it? But have you guys considered anything like that?
Okay, so you're asking about harvesting?
Yes, well that's, yeah.
Okay. Well, in this area, harvesting is not permitted.
Yes, I know that.
But in the bigger picture for Florida?
Yes, but even though technically people have harvest in non-prohibited or prohibited areas or even unclassified, because I get the calls all the time.
Right, but they may still do that.
Yeah. And it's so close to the shore too.
Right. Well, we made this signage up. I mean, I don't know if we've planned that specifically, but yeah, I see what you're saying. That could potentially be a concern. But I do want to mention that at a larger scale, the Nature Conservancy, not just in Florida, but the Gulf of Mexico states, is looking at possibly ways to manage oysters differently, because they're managed more as a commodity, not as a resource, not as a habitat resource. resource. So as that develops, we may be able to find better ways to protect the areas that are there specifically for habitat.
Okay, great. And when red tide comes, we shuck a lot of oysters. So I'll remember you guys, and I'll save my oyster shells. And I also have that mesh, and I do have the tie downs, so I'll do my best to image your project, and I'll donate them to you instead of throwing them away.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Feel free, if other things come up, to email me or to speak with Anne or myself after the presentation. So thank you again.